Hello, everyone. This is Laura Sawinski, not Eric Siligoy. Welcome to Retail Week. My buddy Eric is in Miami area, or he's on his way back. He was there with my colleagues for the Agribusiness Global Trade Summit. They had a fantastic week in the Miami area. So I am guest hosting for Eric this week. And I'm on the road as well. I'm in the Denver area. I had the great pleasure yesterday to meet Rob Clayton. He is the Senior VP with Nutrient Ag Solutions. And we had a great discussion as part of our, Eric and I, as you know, have been doing the Ag Retailers Across America series. So our last installment, which will be in the October issue of Crop Life, will be on national ag retailers. So I had a visit with Nutrient. That was on August 10th, August 11th, Friday today. I am participating in Trimble's Media Play Day. So what's a Media Play Day? Exactly what it sounds like. We are going to be able to interact with various Trimble technology and equipment in the field, kind of a hands-on, experiential, up close and personal look at that. So I'm excited for that. So I have my appropriate closed-toe shoes on and, of course, a denim shirt. So all set for the Trimble Media Play-Day. We'll report on that next week. But today I wanted to share with you, for the first time ever, I think I finally got some quality video during our Women in Ag Tech event on July 24th. And as you know, because I've mentioned it various times on Retail Week, our guest was Dr. Karen St. Germain from NASA. I have a small handful of clips. They're very brief, 2 minutes max each. But I wanted to highlight and share with you guys some of the stuff that Karen spoke to the women that were in attendance that day. So this first clip is kind of like, why NASA, why ag, what's the relationship there? So take a listen on Dr. Karen St. Germain.
We've got a few different missions that are very closely related to what you all do. Of course, you may be familiar with the Landsat mission. NASA builds that for the U.S. Department of Interior, USDA. And as well as we have a soil moisture mapping mission, SMAP, global precipitation mission. Our satellites are the only way we measure global precipitation. Most of what we use here in the U.S. comes from radars in the ground. But to understand the full picture, to see an atmospheric river coming, for example, you really need the space-based measurements, which allow you to measure precipitation over the ocean. So we have a lot of measurements that we make today, and those measurements make their way into information products that you probably use every day. The WASDE report, for example, is informed by the data from our satellites. It's our longest, ag is our longest standing constituency. Started with the first Landsat mission, which was launched in the 70s amid a global food crisis. So one of the earliest Earth science missions was driven by agriculture and the need for information.
I mentioned before, I met Karen during Commodity Classic in March in Orlando, and unbeknownst to me, the longstanding relationship that NASA has with ag kind of took off in the 70s with the launch of the Landsat satellite and the global food crisis. So I thought that was pretty cool. So we talked about, Karen talked about some of the missions, 3 in particular, that NASA is working on right now that are very important to ag. So here's a little clip with Karen about 3 missions.
Our specialty is making all these observations with satellites. And as I said earlier, we measure all attributes of the Earth system. Up here, I'm highlighting 3 missions that we're just starting to build now. The idea being, we want to have more high-fidelity information at the end of this decade than we have today. So one of those missions is the Atmosphere Observing System. That's going to really observe clouds, precipitation, aerosols, and how those work together how aerosols, steam clouds, the nature of those clouds and how that affects the precipitation they'll create. Surface biology and geology, we have missions that can see crop stress from space before it's even really visible to the human eye. And we can see different aspects of vegetation health and density. And then soil moisture, groundwater, and missions that focus on water as a resource. But one of the things we're doing with the agriculture community is saying, hey, if we've got all those observations globally, how can we integrate those into crop models and look at what we can learn about how yields are changing around the world. And then once we evaluate that, use what we know about where our climate is heading to then project forward and identify where we think we're going to see crop stress happening first, where, when, how, and more. So this is part of the engagement we've got going on with the agriculture community.
Her mention of improved forecasting and being able to really do better crop models. I thought that is really, really great. Really enjoyed that. She talked about also this next clip. You'll hear about her talking about the Iowa derecho from 2020 and the devastation that was that caused for crops in the Midwest. So this new technology, synthetic aperture radar, is something that's really, really cool. It's able to sense changes in structure, even corn in a field. So take a listen to this.
I don't have to tell anyone here about the devastating effects of the 2020 derecho. So there's a different kind of information products. The two panels, the upper two panels, the two green ones, are before and after, and that's synthetic aperture radar. Synthetic aperture radar is a particular kind of remote sensing technique that senses change in structure. Whether it's a building shifted because of an earthquake or a crop got flattened, right? Anything that changes structure, moves in position, that's what SARS can see. And so those top two panels are the before and after. We can really see the crop damage from wind and in some cases hail. And then what we try to do from there is actually quantify that damage. And that's what that lower panel is. It's a damage map. And you see the Iowa State climatologist talks about using this information in part to understand the extent of the damage, to quantify it. This could be important in getting relief, getting funds to support relief to producers, but it can also, in various different kinds of disasters, can tell us where to deploy emergency resources as well.
So what was cool, after this clip, Karen mentioned during her presentation that this technology, this synthetic aperture radar, was also used, if you recall, the explosion at the port of Beirut in August 2020 that leveled the port and surrounding areas like for miles. So the FBI was able to have the first initial kind of situational awareness of the damage and what had happened based on what was provided by NASA to them with this type of sensing. So really great. It's just phenomenal, really, what this is able to do. This next clip, so Karen kind of did the presentation, and then I was able to sit down with her for a few minutes and kind of ask her some questions, and then we opened it up to the ladies in the room to ask some things. So I thought I would go easy on her first. First question is, how do we feed the world? How do we assure food security in the future? How do we feed a growing planet, particularly with the impacts of climate change? And I really liked her answer. It made me feel a lot better what's facing us. So anyway, here's Karen.
It is easy to get discouraged. You've probably heard people talk about, we went from sort of denying that this was going to be real to despair without passing through reasonable thought, right? Which is really where we have to be. We have to work together. Because, look, it was millions of decisions, millions of independent, different decisions that got us to where we are today. And it's going to take millions of independent, different decisions to get us to a different outcome. So how do you do that? We've got some really great tools at our disposal. One you mentioned, which is technology. We've got technologies now to give us situational awareness. And imagine where we would be if we were seeing these changes around us and didn't understand why. Right? But we're not in that position. We actually know what's happening. And a society that knows can make different decisions, can take action, and can learn, right? So technology, both for situational awareness, for renewable energy, and more about one of the things that we're discussing with our producers is what can agriculture's role be in the solutions, right? It's not just agriculture. It's got to be many sectors, but everybody's going to play their part. If people don't take action from a position of despair, they have to have hope. We also have social media, which offers the opportunity to share what we know and to learn.
So these last two clips I wanted to share with you, part of the reason, and thankfully, timing was on our side, part of the reason we were able to get not only Karen for our Women in Ag Tech meeting, but Dr. Alyssa Woodcraft was our keynote at Tech Hub Live. So last year, NASA kicked off a Midwest farm tour. They were determined to get out there and really meet the farmers, meet people from the ag community, really have discussions, firsthand. Let's see, let's talk about things. How can we better work together? What problems are you experiencing? How can we help you? So last year was their first Midwest farm tour. They had a great time. They learned a lot. They were scheduling one for this year at the end of July through Iowa as well, which of course was right during the time that we were gathering in Des Moines for our event. So that really turned out well. So in this first clip, Karen talks about the Midwest Ag Tours and what they learned last year and some things that they heard and what they hope to gather this summer. So take a listen to this, and then we'll end with one more.
Well, I'm thinking that, getting out there, like you said, this disadvocated. I would think that this is the second year you guys are doing your tour. What did you learn and what did you see? What did you figure out the first time around? What was surprising? What was, and what do y'all hope to see this time?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many directions to go in here. I guess one of the first things that really struck me was having people and satellite, I'm satellite nerd, right? I build these instruments, I do physics, I do the, I don't anymore. I used to, now I'm a bureaucrat, but I used to actually do real work. And one of the things that struck me immediately is ag people are our people. You're data-driven, you're analytic, you're sophisticated users of information. We are kindred spirits in a lot of ways. And I wouldn't have known that had I not come to where the ag community is. So that's at a very high level. Down at a detailed level, we're talking about joint projects. In fact, a lot of what we'll do this week is exploring project ideas with Idaho farm growers, for example, and others. So ranging from sort of that big picture recognition that we are kindred spirits all the way to here's a thing we could try, and if we try it and it works, boy, it can scale. So it's that full spectrum of things.
Yeah. One last question, and then I'm all ask us to jump in. When Karen and I were talking about an hour ago, you mentioned about the leadership, because I remember when I was down in Orlando, driving around, and there would be, billboards of crime selling, like young women, Patreon billboards. Like, this is fantastic. Like, was that intentional or whatever? Then she was talking about that first phone call and how that all came about, and that the majority of the leadership in the Fred Science Association was that correct? And so was that? So I asked her, was that like by design, or how did that?
Yeah. In fact, folks may not know, as there's no reason necessarily why you should, but NASA is organized in mission directorates. So I'm in the Science Mission Directorate, and there are a number of divisions: Earth Science, Planetary Science, Heliophysics, those are folks who study the sun, astrophysics, those are people who study the universe, and biological and physical sciences, those are the folks who figure out if you want to grow food in microgravity, how do you do it? What's the impact on the body, right? So those are the four, I'll say, technical divisions, and then we have a joint agency programs division. Of those organizations, 4 of them are led by women. The person who runs all of science for NASA is a woman, as are her 2 principal deputies. So we have a number of women in leadership in NASA. I would, in the science part of NASA, I can't speak to whether or not they're doing quite that well in human spaceflight.
So this last clip, again, this was Women in Ag Tech meeting. So we were talking about not only NASA and science and remote sensing and the technologies NASA is using to help support ag, but we were also talking, of course, about women in the ag tech space. Karen had a really interesting story. She talked about the proverbial phone call from Dr. Thomas Zurbuchen, who we'll tell you Thomas's title. He resigned his position at the end of 2022, but Thomas Zurbuchen was the former associate administrator for the Science Mission Directorate at NASA. He was the one that hired Karen. So it's really cool. I want you to listen to her. This is the last clip I have for you guys today, but her story of when she got that phone call from Thomas and what his thinking was, how to create improved diversity and what that yields. So this is the last clip.
Thomas Zurbuchen, and he really focused on increasing the diversity of the leadership team. And here's how he approached it. His view was that for the first 50 years or so of space, it was not a meritocracy. We weren't tapping into well over half the talent in the country, just because of the way the incentives and the way the system was set up, right? So his position was that to correct this, what you really need to do is make sure that your pool of candidates is diverse, and that means where you advertise. That means making sure that word is getting out, and so forth. Make sure the pool is diverse, and then make sure the interview panel is diverse, so you don't end up with biases creeping in because people check one another, right? Because often the stuff is biases are not, they don't manifest themselves intention, because people's attention, but they do manifest themselves. So his position was, I want to see diverse pools of candidates, I want to see diverse hiring panels, and then we hire the best person for the job, regardless of any of the demographic measures. So what that means is if the best candidate for the job in this pool is a 50-year-old white man, that's who we're going to hire. But we're not going to hire because nobody else was in the pool that was a viable candidate. So that's at the hiring at the senior levels. And then, of course, you've got to create an environment that trains people for these leadership roles. Now, what he knew, and it is true, and it's probably true in agriculture too, is there wasn't a shortage of women who were qualified leaders. They just weren't breaking through. And so his measures really allowed us to break through the biases that are inherent in the system. So we are doing well in terms of male-female, or I'll just say gender diversity writ large. We still have a long way to go, though, by other dimensions of diversity. And so I won't let us off the hook on that, but we are getting that.
So thanks, you guys, for indulging me. I'm sure Eric's going to want to see that real quick next week. And I didn't dare touch anything with fun with numbers, so that's his domain. But thanks. It was good being with you guys today. Hope you enjoyed the clips, and you'll see Eric and I next week. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
If you have questions or comments about today's episode of Retail Week, contact us by email or Twitter, or type your message in the comment section below. Your feedback is important to us. We will try our best to address your thoughts in next week's episode, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.